Ryota was a man who commanded fear, respect, and empires with a single nod of his head. As a formidable boss within the Japanese Mafia, his days were dictated by harsh loyalties, unyielding authority, and a fortress of emotional walls that had kept him safely isolated from the rest of humanity for decades. Yet, as the calendar turned toward New Year's Eve, the crushing weight of that very isolation settled upon his broad shoulders like an avalanche of snow. The city around him was alive with electric anticipation. Fireworks were already beginning to paint the distant, freezing skyline in brilliant strokes of gold and crimson, while the sidewalks were flooded with couples holding hands, families bundled in thick winter coats, and friends laughing into the crisp night air. Ryota walked through these crowded streets as a ghost trapped within a remarkably expensive tailored suit. He had wealth that could buy entire city blocks, influence that could bend the will of politicians, and soldiers who would lay down their lives for him without a second thought. But tonight, he did not have a single genuine friend to call. That was the poignant reality Ryota faced as he watched the joyful world spin rapidly around him, utterly indifferent to his monumental existence. He possessed everything a man could possibly acquire in the material realm, yet he lacked the one intangible, fragile thing that makes the human experience actually worth enduring: genuine connection. The cold wind bit at his face, but the chill in his chest was far more piercing. He was a king without a home, wandering the festive streets with an empty heart, desperately craving just a fleeting moment of ordinary, unassuming warmth to remind him that he was still, beneath all the scars and the terrifying reputation, merely a human being. Seeking a temporary refuge from the suffocating loneliness of the icy streets, Ryota found himself standing outside the polished oak doors of the city's most exclusive fine dining establishment. Through the frosted glass windows, he could see a sanctuary of golden chandelier light, hear the faint, melodic strains of a live jazz band, and witness the beautiful symphony of clinking crystal glasses and unrestrained laughter. He pushed open the heavy doors, stepping into the enveloping warmth of the foyer, the rich scent of roasted meats and expensive perfumes washing over him. He approached the polished mahogany host stand, towering over the sharply dressed maitre d', an intimidating presence even when he was completely silent. The host looked up, his professional smile faltering for just a fraction of a second as his eyes took in the subtle, dangerous aura of the man standing before him, the faint tattoos peeking from beneath his collar, and the hardened, unreadable expression on his weathered face. Ryota simply asked for a table for one, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that usually commanded immediate obedience. The maitre d' swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously around the bustling dining room, before offering a bow of polite regret. "I am so very sorry, sir, but we are completely and absolutely fully booked for the holiday evening, so I cannot offer you a seat tonight in another lifetime, or perhaps merely on another day." Ryota might have allowed his notorious temper to flare, utilizing his vast intimidation to force a table to materialize out of thin air. He was a man who never accepted defeat, who bent the world to his iron will. But tonight, a profound weariness had seeped deep into his bones. The sheer exhaustion of constantly fighting, of always being the terrifying force in the room, paralyzed his usual instincts. He simply offered a slow, heavy nod, accepting the quiet humiliation and the undeniable truth that all his dark power was utterly useless in the face of genuine, joyful human congregation. As he stood near the entrance, hesitating to turn back out into the bitter cold, he looked across the sea of happy patrons. They were completely absorbed in their own radiant bubbles of happiness, blind to the shadowy phantom lingering at the doorway. He felt an overwhelming urge to just disappear, to fade into the wallpaper, a wealthy, powerful man reduced to a forgotten bystander on the most celebrated night of the year. Tucked away in a cozy, dimly lit corner of that exact same bustling dining room, an entirely different kind of story was unfolding. Sitting across from each other were 27-year-old Chloe and her vibrant 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Chloe was a vision of elegant, quiet strength, wearing a stunning emerald green dress that she had meticulously saved up for months just to wear on this special occasion. As a hard-working single mother, her life was a continuous, exhausting cycle of long shifts, budget calculations, and sacrifices, but tonight was meant to be a magical exception. She wanted to give her daughter a taste of luxury, a memory of sparkling lights and gourmet food to ring in the new year with abundant hope. Lily was a radiant burst of innocent joy, sitting happily in a light pink dress that made her look like a delicate spring blossom against the dark, moody aesthetics of the fine dining restaurant. While the rest of the wealthy patrons were obsessed with their expensive wines and exclusive status, Lily was captivated by the sheer, unfiltered magic of the environment. Her bright, observant eyes danced around the room, taking in the towering floral arrangements, the waiters gliding effortlessly with silver trays, and the myriad of fascinating faces. Children possess a profound, unclouded vision that adults unfortunately lose over time. They do not see social hierarchies, bank accounts, or intimidating reputations. They simply see people. And as Lily's joyful gaze swept toward the front entrance, she did not see a feared Japanese mafia boss standing in the shadows. She saw a lonely man in a very nice coat, looking incredibly sad as he watched everyone else have fun. Have you ever noticed how a child can instantly spot the one broken heart in a room full of smiles? Lily tilted her head, her innocent curiosity piqued by the striking contrast between the man's massive, imposing frame and the deeply sorrowful, vulnerable expression etched into his eyes. While the adults in the room actively avoided making eye contact with the terrifying stranger at the door, Lily felt a sudden, overwhelmingly pure instinct to bridge the gap, her untainted heart recognizing a fellow human being who simply needed a friend on a night meant for togetherness. Without a single moment of hesitation, governed entirely by the pure, uninhibited kindness that only a child can possess, Lily decided to take matters into her own tiny hands. Pushing her chair back slightly, the 8-year-old girl in the light pink dress stood up confidently on the velvet seat, elevating herself above the sea of white tablecloths and crystal centerpieces. She raised her little hand high into the air, the chandelier light catching the joyful, enthusiastic motion as she began to wave frantically at the intimidating man lingering by the door. A wide, gap-toothed smile stretched across her radiant face, cutting through the sophisticated, muted atmosphere of the high-end establishment like a brilliant ray of unexpected sunshine. Over by the host's stand, Ryota caught the sudden movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned his heavy gaze toward the corner table, his dark eyes widening in genuine, profound shock. Assuming there was absolutely no way this innocent, glowing child was gesturing at him, a feared underworld boss, he slowly turned his head to look behind him, scanning the empty foyer for the true recipient of her joyous greeting. Seeing no one, he slowly turned back, raising a thick, heavily scarred finger to point uncertainly at his own chest. Lily nodded vigorously, her dark curls bouncing as her smile grew even wider, and she waved again, entirely undeterred by his fearsome appearance. At that moment, Chloe realized her daughter was standing on the expensive furniture. She reached out gently, her voice a soft, melodic correction. "Lily, sweetie, please sit down before you fall." As Chloe guided her daughter back into her seat, she followed the trajectory of Lily's bright gaze and finally saw the man standing at the entrance. A brief flash of maternal caution washed over her as she took in his sheer size, the hardened lines of his face, and the unmistakable aura of danger that clung to him. But then, she looked deeper. Beneath the intimidating exterior, she saw the undeniable gratitude, the raw vulnerability, and the heartbreaking loneliness that had flooded his eyes the moment her daughter waved. Instead of pulling Lily away in fear, Chloe made a radical, beautiful choice. She chose to embrace her daughter's boundless empathy, deciding that tonight, no one deserved to be left standing in the cold, no matter who they appeared to be. Chloe caught Ryota's bewildered, hesitant gaze across the crowded room and offered him a warm, reassuring smile that completely transformed her elegant features. With a gentle, welcoming gesture of her hand, she silently invited the solitary giant to cross the room and join their little table. Ryota stood completely paralyzed for a long, breathless moment, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it never did during intense negotiations or dangerous confrontations. The sheer, unadulterated kindness of the gesture was so foreign to his deeply entrenched world of violence and transactional relationships that he almost did not know how to process it. Taking a deep, shaky breath, he slowly navigated his massive frame through the labyrinth of tightly packed tables, intensely aware of the vast contrast between his dark, imposing presence and the delicate elegance of the mother and daughter waiting for him. When he finally reached their corner, he hovered awkwardly, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, looking entirely out of place. "Are you quite sure?" he asked, his deep, gravelly voice laced with genuine hesitation and a profound fear of ruining their night. "I do not wish to intrude upon your beautiful evening." Chloe looked up at him, her eyes reflecting an ocean of unassuming wisdom and quiet grace. "Nobody should have to ring in the new year entirely by themselves," she replied softly, her voice carrying an undeniable, comforting warmth. "Please, take a seat with us slowly, cautiously." Ryota lowered his large frame into the delicate dining chair across from them, feeling as though he had stepped into an alternate, magical dimension. The visual contrast at the table was staggering. The hardened, heavily scarred Japanese mafia boss sitting in quiet reverence across from the radiant African-American single mother in her stunning emerald green dress and her vibrant daughter in pink. Lily leaned forward immediately, her bright eyes wide with innocent fascination as she stared at the faint scars visible on his hands and jaw. "Are you a real superhero?" Lily asked, her tone entirely serious and filled with awe. "You look like you fight bad guys." A sudden, uncharacteristic sound rumbled deep within Ryota's chest, bubbling up until it transformed into a genuine, gentle chuckle that melted away years of hardened ice. "No, little one," he replied softly, a small, deeply emotional smile finally breaking across his weathered face. "I am no superhero, but I am incredibly honored to meet you both." As the evening progressed, the initial awkwardness hovering over their small table began to dissolve, replaced by an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. Ryota, a man who usually commanded silent, terrified rooms, found himself quietly captivated by the mundane, beautiful details of ordinary life unfolding before him. Lily, completely unimpressed by the intimidating aura that usually preceded him, eagerly narrated her entire day, detailing her adventures at the local park and her deep, abiding love for strawberry ice cream. "Have you ever noticed how the most powerful walls we build around our hearts can be effortlessly dismantled by the innocent chatter of a child?" Ryota certainly did. He sat there in his impeccably tailored suit, meticulously slicing a small piece of artisanal bread, listening with the intense focus he usually reserved for high-stakes syndicate meetings. Chloe watched this magnificent, terrifying giant of a man listen to her daughter with such profound reverence, her elegant green dress catching the soft chandelier light as she offered him a gentle, appreciative smile. "She has quite the imagination, does she not?" Chloe remarked softly, her voice carrying a soothing cadence that made Ryota's perpetually tense shoulders drop an inch. "It is a beautiful gift," he replied, his gravelly voice incredibly gentle, one that the world often tries to take away far too soon, A waiter approached their table to pour water, his hand visibly trembling as he recognized the notorious underworld figure sitting across from a young mother and child, creating a moment of gentle, situational humor as Ryota politely thanked the terrified man with a completely serene expression. The juxtaposition was striking, a poetic clash of two entirely different universes sharing a fleeting orbit in a crowded fine dining restaurant. Ryota realized that in all his years of accumulating immense wealth and feared authority, he had never truly experienced this level of authentic, unscripted joy. The simple act of passing the salt, the shared laughter over a misplaced fork, the genuine warmth radiating from Chloe and Lily, these were the true treasures of existence that his mountains of dirty money could never possibly buy. The clinking of crystal glasses and the distant melody of the live jazz band provided a perfect soundtrack to his internal awakening. He looked at his own hands, marked by years of brutal survival, and then at Lily's tiny, unblemished fingers playfully drawing invisible shapes on the pristine white tablecloth. It was a staggering reminder of his lost innocence. He had spent his entire adult life building a fortress of fear, believing it was the only way to protect himself from a harsh world. Yet, sitting here in this warm, golden light, he felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation blooming in his chest. It was peace. For the first time in decades, he was not the boss, he was not a target, and he was not a monster. He was simply a man sharing a beautiful meal. If you are watching this and realizing how desperately we all crave to just be seen as human, perhaps you understand the profound relief washing over him. He took a sip of his water, letting the cool liquid ground him in the present reality. He did not want this dinner to end. He wanted to bask in this borrowed warmth, to absorb the gentle wisdom of a mother who worked tirelessly for her child, and to remember what it felt like to be part of the human race again. The plates were eventually cleared away, leaving a comfortable, lingering warmth between the three unlikely companions as their restaurant buzzed with rising anticipation. Chloe rested her delicate hands on the table, her dark eyes studying Ryota with a quiet, unassuming wisdom that seemed to see right through his formidable exterior. She could sense the deep, echoing chambers of isolation within him, recognizing the universal language of loneliness that transcends all boundaries of wealth, status, and background. "You carry a very heavy silence with you," Chloe observed quietly, her words not an accusation, but a gentle offering of pure empathy. Ryota looked down, the polished silver of his expensive watch catching the light, a stark symbol of the time he had lost entirely to the shadows. "I've built a life that requires a great deal of quiet," he admitted, his voice a low, rumbling confession. "But tonight, I realize the silence has simply become a cage. Have you ever confessed your deepest fear to a total stranger simply because they were the first person to truly ask how you were doing?" Chloe nodded slowly, offering a small, comforting smile that radiated immense strength. "Sometimes, we spend so much time building walls to keep the bad out, we forget to build a door to let the good in," she whispered gently, her words carrying the profound emotional weight of her own struggles as a hard-working single mother. Lily, sensing the slight shift into a more serious atmosphere, reached her tiny hand across the table and placed it directly over Ryota's massive, heavily scarred knuckles. The physical contact, so innocent and purely intentioned, sent a jolt of pure electricity straight to his dormant heart. He stared at that tiny hand resting atop his own, profoundly moved by the implicit trust it represented. In his dangerous world, a touch was always a precursor to violence or manipulation, but this was an act of pure, unadulterated grace. His eyes began to water, the blurred lights of the restaurant transforming into a brilliant, watery kaleidoscope. He did not pull away. Instead, he carefully turned his hand over, gently holding her tiny fingers in his massive palm, a deeply symbolic gesture of a powerful, isolated man finally accepting the fragile, beautiful gift of human connection. The sheer magnitude of this small gesture was overwhelming to his weary soul. For years, Ryota had convinced himself that he was entirely unworthy of such innocent warmth, that the darkness of his past had permanently disqualified him from the simple joys of life. Yet, here was this vibrant 8-year-old girl in a pink dress, effortlessly dismantling his lifelong convictions with a single, gentle touch. He looked from Lily to Chloe, feeling an immense, crushing wave of gratitude for this unassuming mother who had nurtured such a beautiful, loving spirit. She had less money in her bank account than he carried in his front pocket, yet she possessed a richness of soul that made him feel entirely impoverished by comparison. This table, tucked away in the corner of a crowded room, had become a sacred sanctuary, a quiet rebellion against the cold, indifferent world outside. It proved that sometimes the universe aligns perfectly to give us exactly what we need, precisely when we have given up all hope of ever finding it. A sudden, collective cheer erupted from the center of the dining room, pulling Ryota from his deep emotional reverie as the live jazz band transitioned into an upbeat, rhythmic tempo. The maitre d' stepped up to a small microphone, his voice booming over the joyous crowd to announce that the midnight hour was rapidly approaching. The air in the restaurant grew thick with electric excitement, the infectious energy of hundreds of hopeful souls preparing to turn the page on a chapter of their lives. If you have ever felt that incredible rush of collective anticipation, and if you find yourself deeply moved by the power of these quiet human connections, take a moment to hit that like button and join our growing community of heartfelt storytellers so we can continue sharing these beautiful journeys together. Outside the large, frosted glass windows, the city skyline was beginning to erupt in magnificent bursts of light, the fireworks painting the bitter cold night with brilliant flashes of emerald, sapphire, and gold. Ryota watched the bright colors reflect in Lily's wide, fascinated eyes, feeling his own spirit completely elevate alongside the rising crescendo of the music. The patrons began to stand, raising their crystal champagne flutes high into the air, their voices blending into a harmonious chorus of counting down the final seconds of the year. 10, 9, 8. The crowd chanted, the rhythmic sound reverberating through the floorboards and up into Ryota's heavy boots. Chloe handed Lily a glass of sparkling apple cider, and then, with a warm, beautiful grace, she slid a fresh glass of champagne across the table toward Ryota. 7, 6, 5. The voices swelled louder, and Ryota felt his heart hammering a completely new rhythm, a tempo of absolute hope rather than mere survival. He stood up slowly, his massive frame towering over the table, but the intimidating aura was entirely gone, replaced by a profound, radiant humility. He picked up the delicate crystal glass, his hand perfectly steady as he looked directly into the kind, resilient eyes of the woman who had saved his life tonight without ever realizing it. 4, 3, 2. The countdown reached its incredible emotional peak, the music swelling to a triumphant roar. Ryota realized in this magical, suspended moment that he was no longer the lonely, invisible ghost wandering the freezing streets. He was a man surrounded by light, holding a glass of hope, entirely ready to embrace the dawn of a completely new existence. The transformation within him was absolute and irreversible. He knew that the powerful, terrifying Japanese mafia boss who had walked through those mahogany doors hours ago was effectively dead, left behind in the harsh, unforgiving winter wind. The man standing here now was someone reborn in the gentle glow of compassion. He looked at the empty chair next to him, a lingering symbol of his past isolation, and smiled knowing it no longer held any power over his soul. The journey from complete despair to this soaring crescendo of belonging was nothing short of a miracle. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the sweet, perfume-laced air of the restaurant, feeling genuinely alive for the first time in what felt like a millennium. The past, with all its heavy burdens, mistakes, and violence, seemed to instantly wash away under the brilliant, colorful explosions of the fireworks outside. 1. The entire restaurant exploded into a rapturous symphony of cheers, laughter, and the joyful clinking of hundreds of glasses as the new year officially arrived. Happy New Year! Chloe and Lily shouted in perfect, joyful unison, their faces beautifully illuminated by the spectacular flashes of fireworks blooming across the city skyline just outside the window. Ryota gently tapped his crystal glass against theirs, the delicate chime ringing out clearly over the deafening celebration, a sound so incredibly sweet it brought fresh, unbidden tears to his dark eyes. Happy New Year, he whispered back, his low voice trembling slightly with the profound, unfamiliar weight of pure, unadulterated joy. In the midst of the soaring celebration, a waiter moved through the crowd handing out decorative, silver star-shaped balloons to the children in the restaurant. Lily eagerly accepted one, the shiny mylar catching the ambient light, before turning and immediately thrusting the string toward Ryota. Here, Mr. Superhero, she chirped happily, her gap-toothed smile radiating absolute innocence. You need a star to help you find your way home in the dark. That simple, incredibly poignant statement struck Ryota with the force of a physical blow, shattering the very last, stubborn remnants of his emotional armor. A single, heavy tear finally broke free, tracing a hot, wet path down his scarred cheek as he gently accepted the thin ribbon from her tiny hand. He tied the string to his wrist, the silver star bobbing cheerfully above his dark, tailored suit, a beautiful, slightly humorous, and deeply moving symbol of his internal transformation. He looked at Chloe, who was watching the exchange with her own eyes watering, understanding entirely the gravity of what her daughter had just done for this weary stranger. Ryota reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a thick, unmarked envelope filled with enough crisp bills to easily cover the expensive meal and leave a remarkably generous tip, placing it quietly on the table. You have given me a gift tonight that no amount of money could ever possibly repay, he said to Chloe, his voice thick with raw emotion and immense gratitude. You gave me back my humanity. Chloe placed her hand briefly over his, a final, warm seal of their extraordinary connection, acknowledging the profound truth that sometimes the most miraculous healings occur in the most unexpected corners of the world. The sheer beauty of the moment lay in its perfect, unparalleled simplicity. There were no grand declarations, no demands for future favors, just three incredibly different souls sharing a singular, transformative orbit in time. Ryota stood there, a formidable giant of the underworld, weeping silently over a cheap mylar balloon, profoundly humbled by the magnificent power of grace. He realized that true strength did not lie in the ability to instill fear, but in the courage to remain completely open to love, even when the world had taught you to expect only betrayal. The loud, celebratory music continued to play, but for Ryota, the only sound that truly mattered was the quiet, rhythmic beating of a heart that had finally thawed. He wiped his cheek with the back of his hand, completely unashamed of his vulnerability. The heavy, suffocating mantle of leadership that he usually wore had been completely stripped away, leaving only a deeply grateful man standing in its place. He knew that the challenges of his dangerous life would undoubtedly resume in the morning, but he also knew that he would face them as an entirely different person, anchored forever by the warm memory of this radiant mother and child. As the exhilarating rush of the midnight celebration slowly began to settle into a warm, comfortable hum, Ryota knew it was finally time for him to depart. He offered a remarkably deep, respectful bow to Chloe, a traditional gesture of profound honor that he usually reserved only for the highest echelons of society, acknowledging her as the true royalty in the room. He then crouched down slightly to look Lily directly in the eyes, his silver star balloon bobbing cheerfully above his head. "Thank you for seeing me," he told the little girl, his words carrying the absolute, unfiltered truth of a man whose soul had been completely resurrected. Walking back toward the mahogany front doors, Ryota felt physically lighter, as if a massive, invisible mountain had been permanently lifted from his broad shoulders. He stepped out into the freezing, bitter night air, but the brutal cold no longer seemed to pierce his skin. He carried a roaring, inextinguishable fire within his chest. The moral of this story is not merely about kindness. It is a profound testament to the extraordinary, life-altering power of visibility. Have you ever considered how many lives you could permanently change simply by choosing to look up from your own world and truly acknowledge the invisible people standing in the shadows? We move through our busy, chaotic lives building fortresses of wealth, status, and self-preservation, forgetting that the most potent medicine for the human condition is simply an open invitation to share a table. A single, unhesitating wave from an innocent child shattered decades of hardened isolation, proving that no soul is ever truly beyond the reach of genuine redemption. As Ryota disappeared down the bustling, snow-covered street, the silver star balloon bouncing softly above his dark silhouette, he was no longer a feared Japanese mafia boss wandering a lonely world. He was a deeply human being, connected to the beautifully messy fabric of life, walking confidently toward a hopeful dawn, forever changed by a little girl in a pink dress who simply decided to say hello. Remember this the next time you see someone standing alone in a crowded room. Your smile might just be the exact miracle they have been praying for. The universe is constantly offering us these brief, incredible windows of opportunity to bridge the vast canyons that separate us from one another. We can either choose to look away, comfortable in our own insulated bubbles, or we can choose to be like brave, vibrant Lily, standing on a chair and waving frantically at the darkness until it inevitably turns into light. It takes absolute courage to extend your hand to a stranger, especially one who carries the heavy, intimidating markers of a difficult past. Yet, as Chloe beautifully demonstrated, that courageous grace is precisely what slowly knits our fractured world back together. If you take away anything from Ryota's unforgettable New Year's Eve, let it be the steadfast belief that no matter how isolated you feel, or how thick the walls around your heart have become, the capacity for profound connection never truly dies. It simply slumbers, waiting patiently for the right moment, the right smile, or the right little silver balloon to guide it safely back home. So step out into your own life with your eyes wide open, ready to offer your own light to the shadows, because you never know who is standing out in the cold, desperately waiting for a simple invitation to finally come inside.